morning and welcome to Morning Movie News, where they say revenge is a dish best served cold. But Tim Miller is enjoying his just slightly chilled because he's already gotten his revenge on Ryan Reynolds and 20th Century Fox, who booted him off of Deadpool 2. And then I think hilariously thought that he would stick around with the studio and have allegiance to them for his next project. But of course he doesn't. Tim Miller's got to do what's best for Tim Miller, and do what's best for Tim Miller he has, as he has now partnered with James freaking Cameron, for the next Terminator movie. Now this isn't totally official, the details aren't set, but this is something that's developing. It's happening. These conversations are being had, and they're between Tim Miller, James Cameron, and David Ellison, who currently owns the rights to the Terminator franchise, and didn't do much with them with Terminator Genesis, but still Terminator 6 is coming. The rumor is it's going to be the culmination of the series, but come on, this is Hollywood. If it does well, it will not be the culmination of the series. The question is how much will they keep of the films that James Cameron wasn't involved in? Will Arnold Schwarzenegger be involved? There are a lot of creative questions, which we will visit soon. But today I want to focus on the business aspects of it. Okay, so it's a little bit of a tricky situation, and I'm not quite sure why David Ellison is involved, even though he currently owns the rights, because they're supposed to go back to James Cameron 35 years after he gave them over to Gail Ann Hurd for $1 so that he could direct the movie. I love it. Remember, I always tell you that great quote. I believe it's Peter David. No, it's J. Michael Straczynski. Those guys actually look a lot alike. But they're both comic book writers. But J. Michael Straczynski, and he said this at the time everybody was arguing about the Alan Moore Watchmen DC situation. And he said, you sign the best deal you can at the time. And for James Cameron, it was pivotal that he direct the movie Terminator. You know, he'd only had like Piranha to his name at that point to some degree, right? So he really wanted to make sure that, you know, Hollywood likes someone they can, you know, it's so weird because Hollywood will so often go with someone who's mediocre for sure rather than someone who could potentially be great. Although there are the situations like Josh Trank where you're like, yeah, that turned out really bad. That was a risk that definitely did not pay off and actually blew up in your face. But, you know, in order for James Cameron to be able to direct his own material, he had to sign over the rights, which is actually, you know, you think about the George Lucas situation, and he got the rights to the Star Wars merchandise because Fox, again, small town, didn't realize how valuable they would be, and so that was actually like, they're like, oh, you can have the merchandising rights, snicker, snicker, and then they were like, oh, that's not funny. So anyway, kudos for James Cameron for, you know, I feel bad that he lost the rights to Terminator for so long. I'm glad that he was smart enough to put an end date on it. It wasn't forever. But, you know, it was really pivotal that he got to direct that movie. And he became not only a very successful director, but the director of the most successful movie of all time, Avatar, still to this day. No one has been able to unseat that baby. Although Avatar has taken over his life. But he's going to produce or executive produce a new Terminator movie because the rights are going back to him in 2019. Maybe he doesn't want to wait that long. Maybe he wants the movie to come out in 2019. And then because the rights will revert back to him, he can be part of the participation of the earnings, right? And so that David Ellison will stay on board because he currently owns it. Although why would you purchase something? His sister purchased it, Megan Ellison, and then transferred them to him over at Skydance. They both have production companies. Hers is more high-end, highbrow. His is more commercial fare. But they're both the children of Larry Ellison of Oracle, and they have billions and billions of dollars. So anyway, why would you pay $20 million for the rights for something that's going to revert back pretty soon to the original person, James Cameron, right? They must still maintain some ownership. So this is the team that's developing, and they're going out to, you know, another think tank of, let's see how the Transformers think tank turns out, right? I'm not sold on these group think things. I'd rather they find one really good writer and have them suss it out with James Cameron and Tim Miller, who are definitely very talented individuals. But Tim Miller, I think, is so good at action that that's going to be really exciting. And I think there are some questions as to what the Terminator would be like today, considering there are so many other properties like Ghost in the Shell, Westworld, that have the same kind of, when the Terminator came out, it was like a robot that looks like a human. What? I mean, that have been visited before in sci-fi, of course, but especially low-budget sci-fi that's like, oh, Bob's a robot. But here, you know, they had better visual effects, and they started to really do that idea in a way that was, you know, really interesting visually. But, you know, evil robots posing as people is something that's quite common these days. So I'll be curious to see how Terminator can make sure it stays separate from the group and still a leader in the storytelling field of human robotics. I'm very excited. I love T2. It's like just an absolutely fabulous film. And I think that James Cameron is a wonderful, wonderful filmmaker. Even though I don't like Avatar, you have to respect its success, and also that many people do like Avatar, and it's still the most successful film of all time, and it was nominated for multiple Oscars. So, you know, you can't, you know, even though I personally dislike it, it's let's say it's not like the DCEU movies to some degree, particularly let's say Suicide Squad, which is, I think, the majority pans it creatively, so I think there's some argument about that. We'll be talking about Suicide Squad this week too. A lot of videos planned, but you know, Suicide Squad is just like a financial success, but you know, the critics and the fans, there's a lot of hate towards it. But with Avatar, there's a lot of love towards Avatar that's legit, both from fans and critics. So it's an interesting situation. But anyway, I'm curious, what do you think of Terminator coming back? I saw a lot of people be like, just let it die already. But I think Terminator is just too valuable. And T2 holds up too well. T2, by the way, remastered version at the Berlin Film Festival this year. What's happening at the Berlin Film Festival? They're playing Logan, they're playing T2. I mean, I like it, but I think it's kind of weird to see the Berlin Film Festival take on such a mainstream approach, and I don't know how that's going to benefit them besides sales to go to. But I mean, still, you have to travel to Germany to go. But anyway, maybe press coverage. But you can see them trying to raise the profile of the Terminator franchise, and also to remind you of how good T2 was. They're like, yeah, we had some bad ones, but remember how good T2 was? And I'm like, I do. It was amazing. So anyway, very interesting situation, and I'm so happy for Tim Miller. And of course, the Terminator movies have been set up at Paramount. So I think that things have gone really well for him, and I'm so happy, and Deadpool 2 better be good. Now, speaking of Deadpool 2, let's talk about that. There's a casting rumor going around that Pierce Brosnan might be Deadpool. Some people are saying he might also be Mr. Sinister, and surprise, he does show up in Logan, which would totally make sense. I think that's actually not a bad idea. You know, because Pierce Brosnan was hanging out with Hugh Jackman and Ryan Reynolds, and they took some photos and posted them on social media. They looked like a very dapper group. They fit well together. But they looked like they were having fun, and so people were like, why are they hanging out? It must be for a movie. And it probably is, to be perfectly honest with you, right? Especially if they social media, you know, shared it on social media. I'm sure it's to get buzz. Now, I think Pierce Brosnan is a really fun actor. He was, of course, James Bond. He was a pretty good James Bond. It was weird. Everybody wanted him to be James Bond because he played a character called Remington Steele on television, which was kind of like TV's James Bond. So everybody was like, he'd be a great James Bond, especially after Timothy Dalton crashed and burned, right? So, but when he became James Bond, I just think it never really worked out. I think few people would be like, you know who my favorite Bond is? Pierce Brosnan. But still, I think everybody feels nicely about Pierce Brosnan. Like, he didn't ruin Bond. He was a serviceable Bond. But, you know, he's no Sean Connery or Daniel Craig. But anyway, now it looks like he might be having a career resurgence if he's in either movie, Logan or Deadpool. So I'm sure that's one of the reasons he looks so happy in the social media tweets. He's like, yes! And also, he's been doing a lot of, like, direct-to-video movies, like, for the older set, you know, a lot of comedies. Like, I watched one of them with Emma Thompson, where they were a couple on the run, and they got involved in shenanigans. It was okay. It was very direct-to-video, but it was fine, and I think that Pierce Brosnan, again, is quite likable and can be quite funny. So I think that he would, if he were to play Cable, I think that would be interesting, and I think he would be able to keep up with Ryan Reynolds. But the other thing is that it's interesting on two fronts if he were to be cast as Cable. And this is all speculation. It'll get its own video if it's ever actually, when it becomes confirmed, if it's true. But first off, it would be a complete 180 on Cable. It would make, you know, Cable's supposed to be this gruff guy. Like I put in my notes, you know, you could go Mel Gibson, but I don't know if Deadpool can even Deadpool could overcome the Mel Gibson scandal. And, you know, you have to remember that Hacksaw Ridge has been well received. That's because Mel Gibson doesn't appear on camera. I don't really know if the world's ready for that. You could go with Sylvester Stallone, maybe. Like, that's the kind of guy Cable has been in the comics, right? But Sylvester Stallone now has tied himself with Trump. I think there's some difficulty there. You know, I think Deadpool already has to deal with this Tim Miller situation behind the camera. I think they'd like to avoid any more controversy. And Pierce Brosnan is a really uncontroversial figure, so that would be another great reason to pick him. But the other thing is that, you know, casting him, they could make endless James Bond gentleman spy jokes, right? And, you know, British accent, it could just go on forever. It would be hilarious. I also think that Pierce Brosnan, because Cable, of course, is the son displaced in the future of Jean Grey and Scott Summers, he kind of looks like Famke Janssen and James Marsden's kid. Although we're supposed to be rebooting, so I don't know about that. But I like this casting rumor. I think he would be a great choice. I think he'd be a highbrow choice for Deadpool. I think it would raise the stakes. And it would be very good for everybody involved. And again, it's a really unscandalous choice. And also I don't think anybody could have a problem with it. It's not too TV. It's, Stephen Lang wants it, but I think he's too TV at this point. I wouldn't go with him. I just think it's a really safe and good choice. All right, so then nothing's safe and good about the Dog's Purpose scandal, which is our third story of the day. Now, this was developing all last week, and it was kind of a bad situation, obviously, for this film. Now, it started out where PETA has been trying to get this certain animal company that supplies animals to Hollywood films in trouble. They've been, going undercover with them for a while, and they finally got some footage, and they gave it to TMZ, or TMZ purchased it, and it's edited, but it shows a dog being forced against its will to do a stunt in water that's, the dog's very scared, and the dog is put in danger. They have to rescue the dog, and it's really not good. So PETA, this was released on TMZ, and then PETA called for the film to be boycotted at the same time. And of course, PETA is on a roll right now because they just helped shut down Ringling Brothers Circus, an institution where I can see why that happened. I'm not horribly devastated or feel that was unjust, but PETA is effective. I think that's the reason I brought up Ringling Brothers. So everybody, of course, associated with the film, above the line, Josh Gad, the director, Lassie Hallstrom, Gavin Polone, the producer, were like, oh, we're horrified. This is horrible. Let's look at the footage. So, and also the guy who did the voiceover for the trailer, I believe, he gave all his money to the ASPCA. Everybody basically tried to distance themselves, being like, I had no idea. So they looked at, and they canceled the premiere, and they canceled the press junket for the film, because they would be like, that we know what question we're going to be getting constantly, and we don't want to deal with it. They're trying to shut this down. So Gavin Polone said, I looked at unedited footage from that, second unit, or, small unit, because Lassie Hallstrom wasn't on set when that happened. For special effects shots and things like that, and working with animals sometimes, they'll have another unit go and get those shots, and the main people aren't involved in that level of production. So anyway, they go and they look at the unedited footage of that event, and they're like, it's not that bad, the dog's okay, we don't think this is an issue. But they didn't release the unedited footage, which I think is why this hasn't gone away. Now, some people are saying, PETA's horrible, PETA's trying to take down this movie and assassinate it. Why did they release it now instead of, when they were shooting the movie, when they first had it? And it's like, yeah, it is time for maximum effect, because they want to get the most bang for their undercover expose. They want to, I think if they had released it when it happened, it would have died down and it wouldn't have hurt the movie. And the whole idea is to hurt the movie so that Hollywood, you got to hit them where it hurts, which is the bottom line, which is the money. All Hollywood decisions are driven by money. So how do you get them not to hire this company anymore? By having it hurt the actual film's box office performance. So the way I feel about it is that I think it's pretty bad. A lot of you asked me what my thoughts were on this. I think that they should have released the unedited footage if it indeed did clear the production of any wrongdoing. I think that the people who are involved with the film should have known what's happening on their set. And it's not like they just gave a camera to the animal group and said, go get this shot for us and give us back the film. People involved with the production were there. There must have been some level of producer on set. There's, on a big studio picture, people aren't left alone. There's somebody from the higher ups overseeing things. So somebody should have been there, and the fact that nobody was like, hey, even the actors could have been like, hey, Gavin Polone, the producer, or Lassie Hallstrom, I gotta tell you something that happened on set today. A dog almost drowned. It was pretty bad. They could have stopped this, and they could have fired that company during production, and this wouldn't be an issue, right? I think the reason that PETA is able to get so much leverage here is that not only did it happen, but there were no ramifications from it happening, right? It was almost, you can see from the footage that it was like business as usual. And you can see from Gavin Polone's, the way this has been handled going, since it first broke, this is business as usual. It's a little bit like when, something tragic happens to a crew member, they don't get enough sleep, the work hours are horrible, and then, they die. going home in a car accident because they're too sleepy. But you know, the movie studio is like, well, it wasn't on our watch. They were offset. They were going home. That's their own problem. And you know, there's a big, you know, even with the, you know, the Midnight Special assistant camera person Sarah Jones, who was recently killed. You know, everybody gets upset for a little while, and then the industry goes right back to the way it was. So that's why, you know, Pete is trying to at least put this company out of business. And again, if they had fired that company, if they had known had happened on set and let that company go, they could have said, we let that company go, and there wouldn't have been a story here, I think, beyond that company, which had already been fired. So it's a bad situation, and we'll see what becomes of it. And we'll also have to look and see how A Dog's Purpose does this weekend. I don't think the film was slated to do incredibly well. I think it had sleeper potential because people really like dogs and it was a good trailer, but I haven't seen a tremendous amount of advertising for the film either. And now we'll see what happens. All right, so today's viewer question comes from Oliver Edelborg over on Twitter. I remembered to get the name this time. All right, so Oliver tweeted a question. So he says, "Hi, Grace. I read in a recent article from Variety that only 7% of directors working on the 250 highest grossing domestic releases in 2016 were female, which is a decrease of 2% from 2015. Oh, we're dealing with such small numbers. How can we have a decrease, right? Last year's rumors that Suzanne Bier might direct the next James Bond film were floating around. How likely do you think it is that she will become the first female director of this franchise? And what impact will it have if it happens? Or what does it say about the industry if it doesn't?" I love the emojis, the thinking emojis that Oliver put in here. All right, I watch your channel daily. I'm a big fan all the way from Denmark. Hello, Oliver. Thank you so much. Great question. And I think those numbers are alarming. It's only 7%. But I think you have to remember you're looking at the 250 highest grossing releases, and women need to be more commercial, I think, sometimes in their work. I think that's a big issue as well. A lot of times female directors go into like highbrow indie fare and no one goes to see it, which is disappointing. That's why when you know, we had the 50 Shades of Grey, even though it was a much maligned and, you know, made fun of film, still, it was the highest grossing film ever from a female director, and she chose not to return because she was so embarrassed to be associated with the project. And it's like, you know, you should take the win, okay? I mean, you did the work, and, you know, take the win. So I think that women have to be more aggressive in the films that they're making, and they have to be more commercially minded so that that's one of the reasons I think they aren't higher up on that list. I mean, look at Scarlett Johansson. She's so successful right now because she's like, you know, screw it. I'm going to go and make really, you know, strong commercial fare, and she's doing really well with that. You know, it was very smart. So anyway, that's the first problem that I think needs to be addressed. Now, for those of you who don't know, Suzanne Bier is the director of the Night Manager series, which just won a ton of Golden Globes. So I think that's going to help her in picking a director for the new James Bond movie. Although she doesn't have a lot of experience with action, and you know, it's always bad when you have your director have a learning curve on your movie. It's like, go learn somewhere else and then come. Because if she has to have a learning curve, that means the first Bond's not going to be great, and then the second Bond will be amazing if she sticks around as the director. And it's like, I don't know if Bond can really afford to have like a slow film, especially because it's taking so long to make the next Bond movie anyway. And also the question is, will Daniel Craig stay on? And if Daniel Craig stays on, he's probably going to want to help choose his Bond director. And I don't know if he would choose Suzanne Bier. I think he's going to want somebody a little bit more experienced. So I think the first, though, Oliver, the great thing is that she was even in contention. That's a big deal. That right there is a major win. And that Ava DuVernay was, you know, Marvel's first choice for Black Panther. That's all very, very exciting, you know. And I wish she had taken the job, but I think that Ryan Coogler is going to knock it out of the park, and we'll see how A Wrinkle in Time turns out. And also, it's, you know, again, I hope A Wrinkle in Time works well, but again, women, if they want to be on the 250 highest grossing list, they got to make the more aggressive movies. They got to make the comic book movies. They have to make the really, you know, the aggressively commercial films. So it's disappointing to me that Ava DuVernay would go for a project that is not as aggressively commercial. All right, so anyway, I think the real game changer here is going to be Patty Jenkins. She's directing Wonder Woman. It's a big deal movie. It has the potential to not only be a successful comic book movie with a female lead, but also to turn the DCEU around, change the course of that film's, you know, critical standpoint, you know, how it's viewed. And if a woman does that, even better. So that's very exciting. So I think Patty Jenkins is the real test. And Suzanne Bier, I think, is just, you know, as a growing example, I mean, is an example of a growing movement of women becoming more and more forceful in the industry. I mean, I remember when Catherine Bigelow won Best Director, everyone's like, things are going to change. And I think they have, and they are changing, but much slower than I think anyone anticipated after that historic win. So we'll see what happens. But I think probably Suzanne Bier isn't going to be chosen. I think if they really liked the idea, she would be chosen right now. And also, I think the Daniel Craig situation is complicating what's going to happen with Bond going forward. But again, the fact that she was even on the list is a big deal. And I think that Patty Jenkins is very exciting, and that's another reason to watch Wonder Woman. So that's today's morning movie news. Thank you so much for your question, Oliver. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. Please write down below, I think, today's top 3 stories, Oliver's viewer question, anything you'd like to see covered tomorrow, and any questions, of course, that you might have. Thanks for watching. Bye.